Moving from the US to Germany involved way more logistics than we anticipated. From figuring out the bureaucracy of leaving the US, the actual trip, and then after our arrival in Germany, it was actually a lot of work. And I moved here with my husband, who's German. We planned this move basically on our own. We did use some help from, of course, friends and family and the internet. Yeah, of course. So this video is our experience with our paperwork and some of the steps that we went through. And we're gonna split this video in 3 parts. So we're going to start with before, so leaving the US, then our actual trip, and our arrival in Germany. So part 1, before leaving the US. Our finances was one of the biggest things that we had to deal with. So we started by making an inventory of all of the accounts we had, bank accounts, investment accounts, credit cards, all those things, because the address would have to be changed for all of these accounts. And we realized we had too many accounts open. If it's great for your credit score, we did all that so we could build up our credit score, and we were pretty good by the time we left. But it definitely involved then more accounts to manage after the move. So we made that inventory, and then we planned for that address change afterwards. And for a lot of these accounts, we had to check if we could actually have an international address to keep that account. So for example, with our bank, we had to talk to them and let them know, hey, we're leaving the country. What can we do to make sure we keep the account open? And is there a way for us to not have to go physically to the branch to, deal with our accounts? So make sure that you contact your bank and you explain your situation and get this arranged for your trip. We had to check our investment accounts, 401ks, whatever, if we could keep that account while moving internationally. A lot of investment companies or brokers, they do not allow you to keep your normal account if your residence isn't within the United States. And some countries do have some agreements, and I believe Germany is one of those countries that you may be able to use some brokers almost as you would when you were inside the US. But I know, for example, that some brokers will not let you keep your regular account. You need to be a resident of the United States to do that. So I had to check with all those accounts and see if we could keep them or not. And some accounts, so for example, for one of our investment accounts, we could keep the account. They converted the account to an international one. We had to send in some forms, but they could convert it. I believe we don't have access to some of the options. I'm not sure if it was CDs or bonds, but some types of investments require you to live in the US. So you might be out of some of those. Again, depending on the country, you might still be able to keep those accounts, but with some limitations. So make sure to check that. We definitely did so before we left. We set up also a mail forwarding service, I guess, with USPS. We are fortunate to have family still in the US, so we use that service to basically redirect every mail from our old house to our family's house. So this way we don't really miss any late mail that we may get after we move. I think this service lasts for up to 1 year. I'm not sure if you can extend it or not. Taxes and government. At some point, you need to let the IRS know that you left and you're not really a resident of the United States anymore. I am not a tax advisor, so what we ended up doing, we read that we had to update our address with the IRS. We basically need to let them know that, hey, we're not residents anymore. And the way we did it was simply by filing our tax return with a new address that was outside of the country, which, by the way, was a whole issue because some of those tax filing providers, they actually don't let you file your taxes when you're outside of the country, even if you're filing as a resident. I mean, if last year, let's say you were a resident, but now you live outside, some of those providers will not let you file. So we had to pursue different routes to be able to file our taxes from abroad. At least the free services are not really available in a lot of cases, basically because of our location, it was blocked. But some websites you can pay extra and do this filing. So we had to figure that out. But we did, our taxes with our new address. So the IRS should have our new address on file. We also had to figure out the implications, the tax implications of living abroad, which again depends a lot. But make sure that you do that research. You talk to someone that knows exactly how this would work for you. If you're American and you're moving to Germany, for example, there are some tax treaties. So make sure that you do the research and figure out how to deal with that. Also, I'm not American, so I, of course, had a relationship with the USCIS, so the immigration services, and I also have my name on file with them, and I had to update that address to let them know that I am not living in the US anymore. So had to get that updated too. Canceling insurances and services. Again, we didn't realize how many accounts we had, but I had to go and cancel health insurance, any sort of other policy insurance we had, any sort of renter's insurance, car insurance, utilities. So we had to change the utilities back to the landlord. So making sure that we change, water, back, gas, electricity, trash services, and pet insurance. We also had pet insurance for our kitty, so we had to also cancel that. We also have the memberships and subscriptions. So some memberships and services we canceled, some we kept. Some required us to automatically switch to the German side of things. At some point, Google needs to be switched from our US account to a German account. Then we also had to deal with our stuff. And there's something about living in the US that you end up accumulating so much stuff. So we had to decide what we would be keeping, what we would sell, donate, and everything. So selling furniture, all the belongings. If you decide you want to store things, you might need to get a storage place. If you decide that you want to ship things from US to Germany, we did look into that, but we really didn't think we would need those things right away, especially before finding a permanent place to live. So we decided to just move with whatever we could bring with us in our flight. We also had to sell the car. And you can check to see if you can get some of that tax and registration back. So for Kansas, we had to return our license plate to the state, and then we got a little refund back because we of course paid for the full year, but we sold the car before the end of that period, so we were entitled to get a little bit of that money back, which is good. Then we have important documents. So and that really depends on your specific situation, but sometimes you do have to get specific documents for your move. For us, for example, for the marriage license, it was recommended that we made an apostille of our marriage license. So we made sure that that was done. And it does take some time. I remember it took us about 8 weeks to get the apostille back in the mail. So make sure you plan for that in advance if that's a document that you need. Some documents may require translation. We actually didn't have to translate anything because most of our documents were in English, and seems like in Berlin, a lot of places will accept those documents in English. So that was really good, but sometimes you do need to translate. So make sure to check if you are going to need a translation. And of course, if there's any sort of immigration paperwork, you're going to have to do that in advance. So before arriving, we also had to figure out our living arrangements. So we found an apartment online. Make sure that you find a place that allows registration. So that's a process called Anmeldung. And to do that, you're going to be basically needing a letter from your landlord stating that you live there. And that is very, very important for, after your arrival and you can move on with your process. So make sure that you do that. We also looked for a place that could add our names to the mailbox. And that might sound weird. And we only understood what this meant after we arrived here. So your apartment might not actually have a number. Apartments are, differentiated by having your name on your doorbell. So that's quite different from, things in the US. So when you get to an apartment building, and instead of looking for an apartment number, you look for the person's last name. So that is so important for your mail because since, it's not really written anywhere that my apartment number is apartment number X, they rely on that little name tag on your doorbell. So that was also something that we looked for. And a lot of those websites or services for apartment rentals, they do have that very specifically spelled out. Mailbox name change permitted, and also the Anmeldung possible. Okay, and cash. We were told that Germany is a very, very credit card unfriendly country, which was not the case for Berlin. We've been paying everywhere with, honestly, tap. We don't even have our cards with us most of the time. We're just using our phones. But we did exchange some cash. We thought it was important, so we made sure that we had some cash on us. Now switching to part 2, the actual travel, so the actual move. So of course there's the flight logistics, one-way flight. And in our case, we were traveling with our cat, and that's going to be a whole separate video about the cat process. But we had to find an airline that we could bring our cat in cabin with us and also our bags. So for our move, we had 2 people. We had 6 checked bags. We had 2 carry-ons. We had 2 backpacks and a cat. So we had a lot to manage. It was a pretty chaotic trip, but everything worked out great. We had no issues during our flight and with our luggage. They definitely were a little surprised by the amount of luggage we had. We did have a domestic leg before our international flight. So for that smaller plane, I bet it wasn't as easy. So make sure you check. If you're going to be bringing a lot of things, I would definitely call ahead of time the airline to verify if you can, guarantee that your luggage can travel with you. But in our case, everything went great. And another thing that we had to think about was some health insurance for our arrival in Germany. So we just used a travel insurance for that first month before we could be physically in Germany and able to switch to, German health insurance. And now for part 3, we have arriving in Germany. And be ready because there's a lot of bureaucracy to be done. So we moved to Berlin, and Berlin might be very different from other German cities. So everything I'm going to be talking about pertains to Berlin. So let's make that very clear. And our main methodology was to use AI to understand some of the requirements, but always going for the actual official source. So Berlin, for example, has a great website with a lot of information for people arriving from abroad. So make sure to check the official website, not just rely on AI. I think it's a great tip, but AI was very helpful for us to figure out at least the basics. Like, what do we have to do after we arrive, given that we are moving from the United States? So, another thing I want to talk about is the language, because apparently Berlin is also slightly different from other German cities because a lot of people here do speak English, so that does make our lives so much easier for those bureaucracy appointments. We've been learning German, we're trying to speak German during our appointments, and I think it's hilarious because you at some point you might need to, ask that question, sprechen Sie English? And we've been getting a very frequent answer, which is,
we can try.
but then they proceed to speak perfect English. So, yeah, we've been very lucky in this sense. But we've been preparing ourselves for appointments because it's not a given that the person will be able to speak English with you. So, before each specific appointment, since we do speak, I would say A2 German to B1, we're working towards B1 German right now. What we've been doing is going and using AI to simulate conversations that pertain to that specific appointment and learning some vocabulary, at least so we can figure a little bit things out in the process. And that has been very helpful. Sometimes I even write down, I have some notes, and it has come in handy. First thing we did was our Anmeldung appointment. So that registration process of registering your residence, it's a very important part of your process. And you're going to be needing that ready for a lot of other things you do next. So I booked the appointment online, everything through their official website. So I booked an appointment online, and it was actually a combination appointment of the Anmeldung and also the driver's license conversion. So I did both things in the same appointment. It was wonderful. For the driver's license, we had to make sure that we had a valid driver's license during our appointment. My driver's license was from Kansas, and Kansas actually has an agreement with Germany, the state of Kansas and Germany, that facilitates that driver's license conversion. So I made sure to do all the research I could so I could transfer that, because if you don't know, getting a driver's license in Germany from scratch can cost you thousands of euros. And I didn't want to have to pay for that and do that whole process. So I did the conversion. It was about 35 euros. Make sure to check their website because they have a whole document explaining what can be converted and what cannot be converted. So each state has their own rules. At the Anmeldung appointment, we just did the application for the driver's license. So after a few weeks, we got a letter in the mail from the drivers from their DMV here to let us know that our driver's license was approved, our application was approved, and we could go pick up the driver's license. So after, I think that was about 1 month, the whole thing. Next thing we did was open a bank account. So you're probably going to need a bank account that is from Germany. Plenty of options. Next thing we did was open that bank account and also a phone number. So we needed a German phone number. We went to the first store that we saw. Honestly, it was the same one, almost the same one that we use in the US. And we just got a prepaid option. So one thing that you will notice in Germany that is that they have sometimes very long contracts. And we did not want a 1, 2, 3 year contract for that. So we just got a prepaid phone. We paid about 15 euros a month, and we get 25, I think, gigabyte of data available, which is more than enough. You can set it up in a way that every month you automatically pay for those 15 euros, and then that's it. So pretty easy, and honestly pretty cheap too. Another thing that may surprise you is the radio tax. It doesn't matter if you listen to the radio or if you watch TV. So they have this radio TV tax that everyone that lives in Germany needs to pay for. And you can be proactive if you already, I mean, you know that you're going to have to pay for it. It's normally one per household. You can go ahead online and register and have everything ready. If you don't, they will find you. Don't worry. They will send you a letter in the mail letting you know that, hey, you need to register to pay your tax, your radio tax. So that is something that you're going to be paying. It's about 18 euros a month. So when it comes to residence permits and visas, again, that will change completely depending on your situation. So make sure that you do a good amount of research on that topic so you can understand exactly what your process looks like to enter the country and also after your arrival. But for me, everything happened almost online. So I sent all my documents to the government through an email, and they just scheduled an appointment for me. I think in my case, I sent the email with my documentation, and about 2 days later, they already emailed me back with an appointment. So I had to, stop by in person at a specific day and time. Make sure you don't miss that appointment. Specific day and time so I can complete my process. And I know a lot of people have some pretty complicated experiences when getting their Aufenthaltstitel or residence permit. I was pretty lucky, I guess. I did the whole process from submitting documents to having the document in hand within definitely within a month. So for me, it worked out pretty well. Maybe because it was winter, we don't have a lot of people moving in the winter. I don't know. It's just what happened to me. We had to figure out health insurance. So we did arrive with some sort of insurance. We wanted to make sure that we were covered from this moment we arrived. But then you need to get your German health insurance. So there are different options. Again, there's a lot of information online, but there's public health insurance, there's private health insurance. So public and private apparently depends a lot on your salary. So if you're earning above a specific threshold, you're going to be having to pay for private health insurance versus the public system. So again, it really depends on your situation. So we're still searching for a gym membership. Again, that whole thing about the contracts here is a little bit scary. I mean, we were just looking into renter's insurance, which is another thing that you might have to think about, private liability insurance, and insurance for your, contents, your house contents. Some places some places will offer you a 3-year contract. So make sure whenever you're signing a contract for a service to see if it is an annual contract. Again, I've seen 3 years for a specific contract. So gym memberships apparently have the same issue. So some memberships will be really hard to cancel. If you leave the city or the neighborhood, you might have a hard time canceling. So I'm still in the process of finding a gym that will have a better contract. The one I found that is really nearby us is one of those that are relatively cheap. So you think, ooh, great deal. But then you look at the tiny little print in the contract that says that you have to commit for a full year and you have to let them know sometimes 3 months before the end of the contract that you want to cancel it. So you think, oh, I'm just going to wait for the full year and then I'm going to ask to cancel. And they're like, nope, now it's renewed for another 1 year. So yeah, so make sure you spend some time reading those contracts. That can be quite long. I think I covered most of the things that we had to do in this process. It does vary with your specific situation, but there are some pretty standard things that you are going to have to go through, like the whole Anmeldung process. And if you have a driver's license and you want to convert that, make sure it's valid. So moving from US to Germany took way more time and energy than we anticipated. But now that we're all set up, everything is going super well. So hope this helps you if you're in the process of moving or if you're considering moving to Germany, so you can understand a little bit of everything that you might have to do to make it happen. I am not a financial advisor, I'm not a tax expert, I'm not an immigration expert, but this was our experience with the process and the steps that we took to get here. So, thanks everyone. If you have any questions, you can drop it in the comments below. I can try my best to answer you. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.